Hi, thanks so much for joining us this evening for GDC Summer. My name is Emma Kidwell. I'm a freelance narrative designer, and I'll be moderating this session on behalf of Susan. You can ask questions in the chat box next to the session video, and I'll get to as many of them as I can at the very end. Before we kick things off, I ask that everyone is respectful and mindful of our code of conduct when participating in the discussion. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Susan.
Awesome. Thank you, Emma. Hi, everybody. Hello, invisible people. What's happening? So I'm really excited to be speaking at GDC this year. And I just want to get right into it because I want to save a lot of time for Q&A. So as you're listening, please keep in mind anything that comes to mind you'd like to talk about at the end. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Okay, so my name is Susan O'Connor, and for years I was a game writer, and now I'm a story consultant. My job is to help writers and the teams they work with. I have been at this for a while. I stopped counting after 25 games, mostly AAA, but some indie as well. Way back in the day, I founded the Game Narrative Summit actually here at GDC because I really wanted writers to have a chance to get together. So I'm really proud of that. And I also, in addition to working with studios and helping them with their stories, I also teach a course in game writing over at UT here in Austin, where I'm at right now. So what are we going to learn today? So a couple of things we're going to be talking through today. We're going to be talking about why understanding the medium and what's really special about games helps you know what kinds of stories to tell. I'm going to talk about why dance class will make you better at your job. I'm serious. And I'm also going to share a couple of three really specific practical strategies that you can use to be more effective with your designer if you're a writer, or more effective with your writer if you're a designer. And if you are both, you're going to get along with yourself a lot better. So here we go. Okay, so let's start by talking about what are games. So every storytelling medium, and games are a storytelling medium, like theater, like TV, every storytelling medium kind of lends itself to certain kinds of stories. So for example, books. Books are great at showing us the inner life of a character. We can go in chapter 4 inside the head of a character and listen to their thoughts for 5 chapters. And we don't get tired of it. Like, it just is a natural expression that books really lend themselves to. So interior lives are in books. Movies are really great for visual storytelling. Big explosions, gorgeous actors, visuals, pictures really do the job in movies. TV is less about pictures. TV really is a great place where if you are a writer who is really good at creating relationships between characters and then expressing those relationships through dialogue. So knowing what different mediums are good at helps you know where you can do your best work. So games have kind of their own thing, right? And what makes games special as a storytelling medium is really 2 things. One, they allow us to create stories that players can live in. And for those of you that recognize this picture, yay! This is Point Break Live, which is a theatrical production that someone took the Keanu Reeves movie Point Break, turned it into a play, hired trained actors. They perform every night, but right before they go on, they take a volunteer from the audience, just some random person, and bring him up on stage, and that person plays the Keanu Reeves role. Totally unprepared, doesn't know the lines, has to just kind of figure it out as they go along. That is game writing in a nutshell. So it's something really challenging about storytelling in games, and it's also something that's really special. So games let us live stories, and stories bring meaning to gameplay. It makes what we're doing in a game matter when it's working. So stories have a really special power in games. And obviously I'm a writer, so I'm biased, but I think they're worth the effort. You know, we have tools that other writers do not. I mean, one of the strongest tools as writers that we have is the gameplay. Sometimes we think of it as getting in the way, but it's actually like one of the most powerful tools that we can use to make an emotional connection with our players. And the flip side is, to my designers out there, that story is one of your tools as well. We don't always think of it this way. Sometimes designers think, oh, story's in my way, and writers think, oh, gameplay's messing up my story. But in fact, they're actually really powerful tools. The trick is we have to learn how to use them well. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, you know, if we're going to get these two, peanut butter and chocolate, together, then the writers and the designers have to work together. Duh, right? And for people who are outside the industry, like they'll often think, well, it must be pretty easy because you have a lot in common. Writers and designers spend all day problem solving. Writers and designers are both really interested in things like setups and payoffs. And both writers and designers really want to create an awesome experience for the player. So what's the problem? Well, we'll talk about that in a second, but I wanted to first share this awesome quote from Jesse Schell, who is one of my favorite people. He's amazing. And he talks about this idea that it's really for designers, he argues, it's really not about the game. It's about the experience the player has playing the game. And you really could replace games with stories and designers with writers in this, and the same sentiment would apply. So we have a ton in common. So what's the problem? Well, let's talk about it. So, yes, we are all writers and designers are both solving problems, but we're solving very different problems. Writers are sitting there thinking about dialogue and character and relationship and structure, and designers are thinking about things like this, right? Both important problems to solve, both kind of unrelated. Something else that gets in the way, we've got the setup and payoff idea, right? Which is true. Both designers and writers are thinking about it, but writers tend to think of it in traditional story terms, which is beginning, middle, end. And that's because human beings are hardwired for story to think of story in that way. So writers are thinking in a linear fashion often, whereas game designers are thinking in terms of maps and of spaces, right? Story is linear, game is spatial. And then as far as creating a great experience for the player, this is the real zinger, I think. I think if you asked a writer, like, what would be the ideal experience you could deliver to somebody? They're going to talk about something like moving you the way Shakespeare moves audiences. And if you ask a designer, like, what's the ideal gameplay experience? They're going to talk about something elegant and perfect, like Tetris. So we both are looking at different North Stars in the sky, right? And so, like, the big question is, how do we get these things to actually start working together? Because if we don't try to make them work, they're not going to work. And I really think that the challenge in the working relationship is the perfect metaphor for it is the idea of silent disco. So if anyone's ever been to one, it's where you like hang out with your headphones and you dance, and everyone else is maybe dancing to the same music, but you're really kind of doing it on your own. This is a lot of times how writers and designers end up working together. Like they're in the same room and we think they're kind of thinking the same things or kind of listening to the same music as they create their stuff, but they're not even looking at each other. They're kind of doing what they want to do. They're both expressing themselves. One is expressing through gameplay and one through story, but they're not really communicating with each other, right? And part of the reason this happens in studios, I think, is because both people are really busy. They have to do their jobs, and it feels like it's going to be easier if they just do it side by side, but don't get in each other's way very much. But the problem is that doesn't lead to awesome creative breakthroughs and awesome innovations that bring story and gameplay together in new ways. So I want to argue that instead of being at the silent disco, we need to start thinking about partner dancing. Specifically, honestly, the tango is like the best metaphor I can think of because the tango is an improvised dance. And while the man technically is leading, the dancers are really paying attention to each other and following each other's cues. That's why when you watch people dance the tango, the expressions on their faces are very intense. And it's because they are putting all their energy on their partner to try to figure out what wants to happen next. It's not about the woman or the man, it's about the dance that happens between them. And that, to me, is the ideal that we all should be shooting for in terms of bringing story and gameplay together in games. So, no silent disco, yes tango. How do we do it? Let's talk about it. So, this is the very practical part of our talk today. And like I said, I'm going quick because I want to have a lot of questions and answers. It's not about what I say, it's about what you hear. So, I'm here to help. So let me try to unpack 3 strategies that I've been able to use at studios that have really worked that hopefully will help you as well. Again, whether you're a designer or a writer, it'll work. So the first thing I think is worth thinking about is making sure that the story in your game is really built around the way the player is going to win the game. And here's why. Because the players, in a way, really are the most important characters in your story. They're not there, right? They're on the couch, But their opinions matter. If they aren't engaged, they're not going to continue to play the game / play the story. So we've got to factor them in. What they want matters. Their motivation really matters. And a lot of times players are not motivated, especially early in the game, they're not motivated by the story. Players are usually motivated by the game, meaning I want to win the game. I want to beat the game. I want to finish the game. For a lot of players, story is a game progression tool. They'll go along with the story so that they can continue to play. They'll say like, "Oh, do I have to save the princess? Okay, that's cool." Right? And then off they go. And then if halfway through they're like, "No, you have to kill the princess." They're like, "Oh, okay, that's weird." And then they keep playing. Most players are not going to be like, "That's ridiculous. I said I was going to save the princess. I quit." If they're into the game, they'll keep going. So we have to, and this is something that like traditionally when I worked on projects, I would be siloed off with the story and I wouldn't know a whole lot about like gameplay and player progression. And I think that was a huge missed opportunity. You want these things to be in sync as much as possible. So let's say you want to do that. Let's say you want to make sure that like the player's win state and the avatar's desire line are in sync, right? Like what the player wants, what the avatar wants are the same. Okay, so simple way to do it. If you're the writer, go to the designer and say, okay, so what are we doing in this game? Right? You can say, how do you win the game? Or if it's like a really big, ginormous open world RPG that goes on for 100 hours, what's motivating the player, right? What's keeping them going? What are they engaged with? What are they trying to accomplish or do? And then once you've got that information, you go back to your story ideas and you look at the player avatar and what the player avatar is saying. And then you go, okay, what is that avatar saying that she wants to accomplish or do? What is she striving for? And if it doesn't line up, you change it. And this one's a funny one because it seems so simple. Like, who wouldn't do this? But I have been brought in to consult on multi-million-dollar projects. And one of the problems was this one. The play testers were like, I don't understand the story. I'm totally ignoring it. And we took a look at it and it's like, well, what that avatar wants to do and what the player wants to do have nothing to do with each other. Of course they're getting confused. So this is a deceptively simple strategy, meaning it's so simple that it often gets overlooked and forgotten in the chaos of game development. So simple is good. If you're running into story problems, this is one of the first things you can check. Okay, so that was our first one. Second strategy that I've seen really work on teams is the idea of really embracing the idea of theme, which I know is a little bit English class, but bear with me. So a lot of times in this industry, when we talk about story, we're talking about like plot beats, right? This is going to happen, then that's going to happen, and then that surprise is going to happen, which is great, except that a lot of times it ends up, remember our silent disco? It ends up going into a non-playable cutscene, right? When we have cutscene gameplay, silent disco. And that creates a big divide, right? Between the designer and the writer and between the gameplay and the story. But if you talk about story in a different kind of way, if you kind of get above the like day-to-day plot points and you get up into the 30,000 feet level of theme, now both the writers and the designers can rally around a shared idea and bring it to life using their specific tool set, right? The writers can use plot and character and designers can use systems and mechanics, but they're both driving towards the same goal of theme. So what is theme? So theme, and it's a funny term. I mean, I do this for a living and even I am like, what is theme? What am I talking about? But it's not subject matter, right? We're not talking about like poverty or something like that. We're talking about a point of view on a subject matter. And this is a tricky one to bring up because most games really don't take a point of view, right? But think about stories that you've loved in other mediums. There is a distinct point of view in the stories they're telling. And even in games, the games that do take a point of view in their story are often the games that we remember, the games that sell really well, and the games that win awards because they're more interesting. They actually are saying something, but they're not saying it. They're letting you live it out. So theme is one of those things. It's invisible. It doesn't seem like it's that important, but when you commit to making it a fundamental part of your work, everything comes to life and everything is elevated, and your game design and your story are going to mesh in ways that you probably don't expect. Like this can be the stuff. This is the stuff that makes it rise. So let's say you're like, okay, cool. I want to use theme in my work. What do I do? Well, you're going to, again, every step of this is going to involve starting with the player/designer. You're welcome, designers. But it is where it starts, right? The player drives everything, and the designer is the advocate for the player in a lot of ways. So think about what the player is doing. Like, what are the verbs? What are the actions that we're doing? Then think about how that's going to feel, right? Because there's 7 billion unique snowflake souls on this planet, but we can take some educated guesses about how people are going to feel when they play this game. You know, if it's a wild shoot 'em up, they're probably going to feel pretty fired up, right? Pretty aggro. Safe to say, right? So you can start to guess where they're at emotionally, and then you take a second and this is whether you're a writer or a designer, either one or both can do this and really think about what you care about. Like, what kind of a message would you want to deliver in what you're creating? And if you're like, I don't know, that's tough, I guarantee the answer is in the things that you already love. So sit down and look at your 5 favorite games or your 5 favorite stories, and just do a little thought exercise and try to figure out what they all have in common. And that is something that's really important to you, guaranteed. So once you've taken a chance to do that, kind of figure out where the player's at emotionally, figure out where you're at as a person, basically, and then try to figure out how to bring them together. What kind of a point of view could we deliver that the player would be ready to hear, would be in the mood to hear, would be in the mood to experience in this game? And then, of course, it has to be a story that's lived, not watched. So the final cherry on top of this sundae is that you find ways to express that theme through choices that the player makes. And then the choices become meaningful because the story and the game you've created are meaningful because you've got a point of view behind it. This part is the most dense part of my presentation. So I know I kind of gave you a whole bunch, but I just wanted you guys to have enough to be able to, like I said, go back to your studio tomorrow and try some of these ideas out. So I'm happy to talk more about this for anyone that's interested. But we're going to come up on our third and final strategy right now. Yes, player choice. Yay. Okay, third and final one, follow the player's lead. So what do I mean by that? Well, I want to take another step back because I think it's going to help us. This is something that I heard in a Jesse Shell talk in 2013 at GDC. And Jesse was quoting a professor at USC who made this awesome prediction, which I've never forgotten, obviously, because here I am talking about it 7 years later. So here it is. He predicted that he took a look at the way film started. And he's like, when film first came around, it was all silent films, black and white. And everyone was like, this is dumb. It's for kids. It's never going to amount to anything. It's a fad, right? People looked down on movies when they were silent films. But eventually, movies learned how to talk. And they grew and they evolved and they blossomed. And they went on to become the dominant storytelling model for the 20th century. So, okay, if we're going to argue that games are kind of next in line, if games are going to be the next dominant storytelling tool for this century, well, they already know how to talk. Like, that's not the problem, right? They talk plenty. And Chris Swain says, we're not waiting for games to learn how to talk. We're waiting for games to learn how to listen. And I don't mean in that creepy Siri, Alexa, eavesdropping kind of way, but in terms of like both game design and story being extremely responsive to the player in the same way that we are responsive to each other in real life. And of course, Telltale has taken pour one out. Telltale, made some great strides in this, right? Using stuff that's not technically super complicated. Putting a Kenny will remember that on the screen is not like a major heavy lift for the programmers, but it had a huge impact on the players who were like, what? What does that mean? Oh, am I in trouble? Like, what's going to happen next? Right? This was a really simple and powerful example of how listening to the player deepens the experience and transforms it for the people who are playing your game. So let's say you want to make your game a better listener. Whether through design or story. How can you do that? Well, you really just look for ways for the story to respond to player behavior, really is all it is, right? So obviously you can do big things like defeating a boss. or like little things like particular dialogue choices. This is not so much like a specific set of tactics, so much as it is about like, I want to put this on your radar, right? I want this to be on your radar, whether you're a designer or a writer, thinking, how can we make this experience be more responsive to the player, and brainstorm with each other and with other people on the team to look for ways to make this happen. Like that's an interesting problem to solve. And a lot of people on your studio can help to make that happen. It's just going to require a whole lot of talking, right? Not silent disco, Tango. So, okay, guys, we have reached the end. Like I said, buku time for Q&A. So what have we learned today? We talked about the idea that games are uniquely positioned to let us live stories, and also stories can make your gameplay really matter. And that's a thing that is worth embracing. We talked about boo silent disco, yay tango. And I want to say also, I know that the idea of literally doing the tango or metaphorically doing the tango can be real anxiety producing. And I get it. It requires that you become more vulnerable, and it requires that you become more reliant on the people on your team. So, yes, it is scary, but it's worth it. It's worth trying. And then we also shared 3 strategies that you can use at work to bring that story and that gameplay just a little bit closer together. And the 3 strategies were, just to remind you, we talked about like build a story around the way that the player wins the game, really embrace theme for all of its 11th grade English class glory. And both design and story should be looking to the player and following their lead. Okay, so before we get to Q&A, I wanted to share with you guys, one of the best things about being at conferences is that you get a chance to talk to each other in real life, like after the talk, right? Like you get to catch the speaker in the hallway and have a chat with them, and it's fun and it's awesome. We can't do it in quite that way this year, but we can do it virtually. So I've put together a web page, and this is not on my main website. You have to go directly to this URL to get to it. But for people who are attending tonight, you're welcome to go check it out, and you can book a call with me. And I would love to have a chat with you, and we can just pretend like we're at Moscone together. And you can tell me what you thought about the talk and ask questions, and maybe you've got some ideas you want to share with me too. I would love to hear it. So I hope you'll take advantage of it. And that is my presentation, and I'd love to do some Q&A now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Susan. We got quite a few questions, so I'm going to pull from the very top of the list. Let's see.
I wish I had a moderator in life. This is so luxurious. I love it.
So Tori asks, can you give us examples of games that had a strong theme and how it benefited from that theme?
Sure. How about BioShock? I mean, that's a mic drop, right? I mean, my BioShock really embraced like Ayn Rand and objectivism, and like really, and again, took a point of view on it, right? Like, okay, what if we took objectivism to its like ultimate, we sort of thought the whole thing through. That's not the only example of a game that really embraced theme, but that to me feels like the most like overt and clear example of like putting you inside of something that feels very dry when you read about it. Like, oh, objectivism. I read about this my sophomore year in college and I slept through it. But like nobody sleeps through BioShock.
That's a really good example. We got another question. They said, hey, Susan, great presentation. If the writer wants to add something to the mechanics because it helps emphasize the theme in the story more, would that be crossing bounds? If not, what are some tactful ways to approach it?
So sounds like, well, first of all, like that's definitely the way to be thinking, right? Like, I think about, and I'm guessing you're a writer person. So, I think about our storytelling tools almost like, how when you see a cooking show and the chefs show up and they've got their knife roll and they like bust it out, and every knife's got a special job. This is my fish knife and that's my paring knife. And like I think about the ways that we can tell stories in games, and I think of like dialogue, for example, as like the weakest tool we've got because players just don't listen, right? And then like environmental storytelling is a very strong tool, and mechanics is a super strong storytelling tool. So I don't think it's overstepping bounds, but I think it really speaks less to like the craft and more to the politics, because it's got to be an idea that both you and the designer can get excited about, right? And so this is where being a really good team player comes into play. Sorry. Right? But like spending the time, and this is also like this is just career advice too. Like I've been talking to my friends who run writing teams at studios, and I'm like, what do you look for in a writer? And I was expecting a whole bunch of like, well, they've really got to know how to do branching dialogue, or they really got to know artisy or whatever. And they're like, they've got to be able to work with other people. That's what everybody says. And I was like, really? Okay. And this is a perfect example, right? So, like, let's say you have a great idea for a mechanic. Then it just becomes a question of like, how can I share this idea with the designer in a way that doesn't feel like I'm telling that designer how to do their job? Right. And so that's where, like, if you've got a level of trust with each other that you've established previously, then you can go and just throw some ideas around. And here's the trick, and this is the challenge too, honestly, listen to what they say. Like, they might say no, and when people say no, the temptation is to mount a defense. Like, "No, this is a good idea. Listen, I'll explain it again, but I'll be louder this time." Then you'll get excited about it, right? But the smarter play is to just be quiet, listen to whatever they say, whatever their objections are, and then go away and really think about it. Because everybody that works in game development, in my experience, is very smart. And when people have an objection to an idea, they usually have a pretty good reason for it. And that reason is usually, in my experience, rooted in something that I don't know anything about, whether that's like an engine limitation, or like, the publisher will never go for it, or who knows, any of a host of reasons that have nothing to do with your awesome mechanic idea, but it's still going to be an impediment, right? So I think embracing the possibility of getting involved in game design as a writer is really important, and vice versa. I want designers to start getting really excited about being involved in the story process, and then it's a question of how do we do it collaboratively, and that takes time, unfortunately, but that's how it gets done.
Like with anything, right?
Like anything, right? Exactly.
Let's see. So Nathan asks, can any kind of gameplay benefit from having a story and vice versa? For example, can a mechanics focused game like Tetris be improved with a story that matches it well enough?
So that's an interesting question. I'll be honest, I do not want to see a story Tetris game. Like, Tetris is perfect. Like, why would we add a story to it? What's exciting to me, this will be a positive comment once I get around to it. Games don't need stories. Not in the same way that like movies need stories and TV needs stories and books need stories. Games are a storytelling medium, but that is not their reason for being.
Hmm.
And so story is optional, and therefore I think as an industry, as a bunch of creatives, being a whole lot more foolish around story ideas. We should be crazier and more creative and try nuttier things because it's optional. Like, if it doesn't work, just cut it, right? I mean, not to be overly simplistic, but I do think that you not every game needs a story. But when story and gameplay really work, there is something special and magical that like can't be replicated. And the other thing about this too is that gamers are desperate for this stuff. Like, the Entertainment Software Association did a study of like what motivates people to buy a game. Like, what's your decision criteria? And 57% of them are like, well, if it's got a good story, I'll buy it. Like, that's a big number, right? And so, and all games out there like have a really solid code base, and all games have great animation for the most part, and great music and great game design. But the one place you can really stand out even now is if you can deliver a great game with a great story. It's hard to do, and so the ones that pull it off really stand out. And so even though it's hard to do, it's worthwhile and it can be done. And the reality is it's only going to get easier because just going to learn more and more and more about how to do this. It's hard now, but it's easier than it was 5 years ago, which means it's going to be easier than now, 5 years from now it'll be even easier.
I've just been nodding at everything that you've been saying because you're making really good points. I'm just sitting here like, yeah, she makes a lot of sense.
Well,
Uh,
I'm teaching a writing for games masterclass right now, and like we're just really going deep on all this stuff. And like, yeah, it's really exciting to think about it. Like, it's full of
Absolutely.
potential.
Let's see. So Bradley asks, what are some strategies for communicating with team members who are not as story-minded to encourage them to value integrating narrative into their work?
Yes. Um, my boyfriend is a designer who doesn't like story, so I get it. I really get it. Um, so hmm, I find that what really helps, and again, this is the long game, right? This is like investing in the relationship with that person. But even people who like say like, I don't want to work on a story-based game are gonna go home at the end of the day and watch Game of Thrones, or like everybody loves story, some kind of story, right? Um, and so I find a lot of times when I'm trying to talk with someone who's kind of resistant, I don't talk about the project at hand, but I just ask them like, well, what stories do you like? Like, it doesn't have to be games. It can be, are there movies that you like? Are there TV shows that you like? Inevitably, there's going to be something. And then, like, getting to know what they like about those stories that they like and kind of digging in, without being intrusive, right? But you want to find some common ground with them. And a lot of times, the things that other people love can become the common ground where you can start a really good conversation with them. And the other thing, so that's like one tip. And the other tip I would give is like be curious, right? Like instead of and I've done this. I've been like, I can convince them. Like if I just say enough words, they're gonna bow down to me and they're gonna accept that story really matters. Um, but instead, like, be the read, like just be, well, tell me why. Tell me why you think story's not good in games. And let them make their case. And there probably is some nugget of insight in there that will be really helpful to hear. And then, like I was saying earlier, like going away and reflecting on it. If you can, here's the trick. Here's what we're shooting for. You want to get to the point where you can really see the problem from their point of view, like legitimately, like not in a patronizing kind of way, but like, wow, they've got a good point. I see what they're saying. And the trick is, as writers, you guys, like this is actually tapping into your superpower, because writers, one of their superpowers is that they've got a lot of empathy. Writers have a real gift for putting themselves in someone else's shoes. So think about it in terms of like making a power move as a writer, like really getting to know that character, which is that person at your studio that doesn't want to do story, and find out why. And then, if you can empathize with them, here's the thing, this is a marketing message, but it weirdly applies to this, which is you can't be seen until you learn how to see. And all that means is like, you've got to understand them first, and then they're going to be way more open to understanding you.
No, that's really
Again,
good advice.
yeah, it's longer, it's more effort, but it's how you win.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of really good questions, so I'm very excited. So let's see. Evan asks, what are some of your favorite methods for avoiding unplayable cutscenes?
Mm. You mean like in terms of like when I'm working on a project, how do we keep from like defaulting into uh, yes,
They
I
don't
guess. Yeah, don't
specify,
say.
but let's go with that.
Yeah.
And if they want to amend their question, I'll get to it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm being ridiculous. I'm like, what? You mean like when I play, do I skip cutscenes? But I'm sure he means what I just said. Okay. Yeah. So, well, I'm not opposed to cutscenes like as a blanket statement, but I am opposed to story and gameplay being really separate. So, like for example, if there's a real push for on a project for like using cutscenes, what I want to do is use cutscenes. Here, you know what? I'm going to be specific and use an example. I'll tell you a game that I think did a great job with cutscenes is the original God of War. Because when you play the God of War, Athena comes to you and says, Ares has gone mad and only you, the strongest Spartan, can kill the God of War. Will you do it? And if you go back and you watch a cinematic on YouTube, he doesn't say, hell yeah, I'll kill the God of War. I hate that guy. He sucks. Like, it's not a revenge story. What he actually says is, I'll do it if you take these memories away from me. And this is the beginning of the game. I'm like, what memories? Did I miss something? What memories? What's going on? And so as the game progresses, we get to see more and more of his memories, which are revealed in bits and pieces, which are huge payoffs for me. I've been waiting for that. right? Because this mystery was set up ahead of time, and the cutscenes play out in such a way that they give me just enough. They close a loop and they open a loop at the same time.
Hmm.
They really keep me on the hook. And so for me, and it turns out that what's happening in the memories he's trying to forget is tied to the gameplay in ways that become not clear at first, but become clearer and clearer as the game goes on. So that to me is like a magic trick. Like it is cutscene based storytelling, but deeply integrated with gameplay. Um, and that's cutscenes are just a tool, a weak tool, right? Dialogue is your weakest tool. Second weakest tool is cutscenes, but they can be used well if they're just used carefully.
Right. Uh, it looks like they added to the question, and I think you may have answered it, but they clarified and said, as in, how do you deliver large amounts of story without just turning it into a movie?
Right. Okay, fair. So that I'll give a slightly different answer to that question, which is really good. I think that, what and again, I think we just want to sort of look at our tools, right? Like how can we deliver story? Here's how you deliver story in a game. You figure out what the player is paying attention to and you put the story there. So, for example, um, players pay a lot of attention to the world because that's where the trouble lies in terms of enemies, right? And that's also where the treasure lies. That's where the loot is. That's the nap they're trying to navigate. There's the bridge I was looking for. So they're real attentive to the world. So, like, environmental storytelling is really powerful. Um, and, mechanics can be really powerful. And I think also something else I want to say, every answer could go on for an hour, but something else I want to say is that um, games are really storytelling in games are really counterintuitive. Like if you've got a big story that you want to really deliver to the player and it's real important to you that they see it, the best way to deliver it to them is to hide it from them. Like like you want to use what they call pull storytelling versus like push storytelling. So if the gameplay stops and I push a cinematic on you, like you just want to skip it. Like it feels like an affront. Like, hey, get out of
Mhm.
my space, right? But if you're playing a game and it's like you don't know what's happening in this world, but clearly something is, and it's crazy, and you want to understand, you can't figure it out, and you want to know more about it, so you start exploring, and then you find some notes here and there and whatnot, right? That's pull storytelling. That's pulling you through the space so that you can discover the story. And if you turn story discovery into a gameplay reward, like, that's when things really start clicking. So, I say if you've got a great big story, hide it like an iceberg.
That's a really good way of putting it. It's a really good answer too.
Thank you.
Um,
Like I do this for a living or something.
who would have thought? So Bryant has a really good question, and they ask, "What are your thoughts about writing tools like Twine, RenP, Final?"
Ruh-roh.
Uh, did you
Hi.
not? Hi, sorry, I'm dealing with a little bit of rain and thunder on the East Coast. Did you hear the
Oh,
question that I asked?
I heard the first part. I heard twine, and I did
Okay,
not hear the other two things. Sorry.
perfect. No, that's fine. I'm glad we got you back. Well, I got you back. So Bryant wants to know, what are your thoughts about how writing tools like Twine, RenP, Final Draft influence the way that story gets hammered out in a game?
Aha. Perfect. Okay.
There you go.
So, uh, I wrote a whole thing about this, I think, on my blog. But here's my thoughts. I think Twine is awesome for a couple different reasons. It's great for your portfolio, and it's great for prototyping ideas with your team, right? It's because you don't need anyone else to do it. That no one. It's interactive storytelling. That's only the writer has to deal with it. So it's really good for rapid prototyping of ideas. I think. I don't use Final Draft. I think that it just gets me back into like screenwriting mode, and storytelling in games is just so different in some ways than that. I mean, it's great for cinematics, right? And that's the problem. If like your favorite tool is good for the you know your favorite software is good for creating the weakest storytelling tool you've got, that's bad because then your tendency is going to be to lean towards it, right? Like cutscenes are fun to write. You've got so much control, and it's also perfect on the page. But if the player skips it, then it didn't happen. So I think that like we are still lacking in tools, honestly. I mean, Twine's good. I know that there are studios that use Artisy, and I think they've had some good success with it. But, for writers who are outside the industry, I think it would blow their mind if they heard that there is not some industry standard software for writing games. Like, that would make no sense to them. And it shouldn't. This whole industry is full of programmers. Can't we find some people to write a program that'll work for us? I mean, it's crazy. But I know a lot of studios use homegrown writing software. And I don't know, we just haven't solved this. Here's what's going to happen. Someone's going to solve this problem. We're going to get some really great industry standard software. And then a year later, 6 months later, the quality of storytelling in games is going to make this quantum leap. And they're going to think it's because they hired better writers, and it's not. It's because they're going to finally have better tools. So please, somebody do that. I'll pay you $1 million bajillion. Thank you.
Now you have to keep on that promise when it happens.
Bajillion
That's a big challenge.
I've got it. Call me up.
JD has a really good question. They want to know, how do you process criticism in this writer-designer relationship and decide which hill you want to die on, if any, without being confrontational and unproductive?
Yes, Queen. I love this question. I know we're getting to the end, and I literally could stay here till sun comes up talking about that one. I'll try to give you a short answer. So I think one of the things that's really important about growing as a game writer is figuring out which hills to die on. It's really important to be collaborative. Everybody gives a little on games, everybody. And we have to give as well. But there are some things that are worth fighting for. So I'm going to share with you the things I think are really important. And here's what's not important. Here's where I think it's really important to be really collaborative. Plot is a shared endeavor. You have ideas about the plot, so does the designer, so does the programmer, so does the player. And that is great. It should be a group effort. Don't sweat plot. Let it be, right? Throw out ideas, make suggestions, but let it evolve however it's going to. The place where you want to put your storytelling love, where you can be of greatest service to your team, is by really committing to the characters. Storytelling in games is about character creation. And oftentimes, when I say character, I don't mean the player avatar. Like when I work on a project, I skip right over the player avatar. Like I push that guy out of the way so I can get to the NPCs in the corner. Because the player avatar is going to do whatever the designer and the player want to do, right? I really don't have a whole lot of control over that. And if I create a really fully fleshed out character for that avatar, that's probably going to get in the way of the player's experience, right? Because it's no longer them in the game. It's this guy or this girl. But the NPCs, like that, those are your actors. Like those are the ones who are going to read your lines and believe your story and embrace your motivations and live out the themes that you want to describe, right? Like what we want to do as game writers, and I'll maybe end on this note, like where we can do our best work as writers in games is if we create characters who have inner lives, who have like hopes and dreams and fears of their own. They feel like they are living a life and that you just came along at a moment in their life to either be their best friend or their worst enemy or somewhere in between. But we love living worlds, and living worlds are full of interesting characters, and interesting characters are characters who are interested in something. So like what I would say to you and what I wish I could get in a time machine and say to myself 15 years ago is like, let it be with the plot, be a good team player around that, and give all of your love to the characters, because that's what's really going to have the most impact on the player, and that's who you're trying to reach.
I think we have time for maybe one more really quick question with a quick answer. Kay wants to know, do you think there is such a thing as too many game notes or audio diaries?
Oh. Yeah, I could see that getting out of control, right? You want to have I mean, really, and that kind of comes down to, like my first thought about that would be, well, it depends on gameplay, right? Like if the gameplay is a real like run and gun manic kind of situation where like probably the player's only going to pick up 20% of the notes, well, then go to town, have 1 million of them because you want to make sure that the player gets at least some of them. But if it's a real like creepy crawly slow mo kind of a thing, like be more judicious, because if there are notes falling out of the air ducts and you're kicking up like a foot's worth of notes all the time, they don't feel very special. right? And so we want the players' ability to discover the story to feel special. And so I think it's really about tuning, right? You just have to kind of like you got to be not too much, not too little. There's a sweet spot in between, and you don't know it where that sweet spot is until you start testing.
And that is all the time that we have. That was a perfect timing. Um, Susan, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with all of us tonight. And I want to
Yeah.
thank everybody for their really great questions. And
Thank
that is
you.
the end of GDC Summer for us. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us.
Yay, pajamas GDC is over.